Gives me much pleasure to be here this afternoon. As has been highlighted, that the Human Development Index is actually very, very critical. And I'm glad Michael actually mentioned the fact that we need to get away from measuring our level of success of individuals within our own countries or the level of success of a country simply by looking at the GDPs or the income per capita, essentially, because it does not give us a true picture of how well a country is doing. I'd like to, of course, also acknowledge the European Union ambassador is here, the High Commissioner is also here, and all the other individuals who are in this room who have somehow or the other contributed or are contributing to this particular area which is largely been forgotten. And I think from one perspective, the MDGs and now the SDGs actually have brought about a lot of awareness, a sense of responsibility that development is not simply about measuring how much inflows you get of foreign direct investment, what is the level of the GDP growth in a country, but it's about ensuring that that growth, that development actually spreads across within your country, that growth, that development also affects other areas. And I quite completely agree with the fact that the aspects such as access to even legal aid does matter. It improves the quality of a person's life, your dignity levels. It also has an impact on your ability to be empowered, to be part of mainstream society. And I think that is very, very critical. The report obviously has, and the reason I brought these papers along is because I've got some figures here. From the Fijian government perspective of Fiji as a country, it has some good news for us in that it shows that Fiji's HDI is above the average of countries in East Asia and the Pacific. According to a report, Fiji's Human Development Index value for 2015 is 0.736. This puts Fiji in the high human development category, positioning it 91 out of the 188 countries and the territories. Obviously, there's a clear progression. We've also done some further analysis that if you take the 9-year periods from 1999 to 2009, Fiji's HDI value increased from 0.666 to 0.698. And then if you look at the index from 2007 to 2015, there's been a growth of 5.5% compared to the growth of 4.8% for the same period, or an average annualized growth of 0.61%. So obviously we're doing a lot better, and the fact that the government has provided focus on such things as access to education, putting in more funding for medical services, but also at the same time addressing areas such as looking after the disabled people a lot more, providing some mainstreaming for them, whether it's in terms of employment opportunities, whether it's in terms of direct funding to respective organizations. What is also very critical is the report also factors in inequality provisions. So even there's an adjustment for inequality. And even if you look at that, if you make that adjustment for inequality, we obviously are doing a lot better than many of the East Asia and the Pacific Island countries. But I very quickly put a but to that, because we cannot obviously say, well, you know, we've done this, so it's all wonderful. The reality is that all of this can be very quickly unwound. The reality is, as we saw, for example, with Cyclone Winston last year, that wiped off 1/3 of the value of our GDP. 40,000 Fijians had their homes completely damaged or partially damaged. There's something like 234 schools that were damaged. We have a rebuild effort this year of $205 million. All of this actually, the kind of improvements you have can be wiped off by one single climatic event. So we need to be able to ensure that there needs to be an understanding of the level of vulnerability. I haven't read the report in depth whether there is a factoring in of vulnerability, and also at the same time to ensure that there is resilience built into the structures, whether it's economic structures, whether it's in respect of the other soft infrastructure that may need to exist to ensure that the aspects such as climate change, which precipitates single climatic events, but also has an ongoing issue, As I've said it last night, and I said it again this morning at a gathering of high school principals and teachers, that it's an ongoing issue. We've had 3 villages that have been removed from the location where they've been there for generations, and they are living on higher ground. It has a huge impact on how they are going to then provide sustained livelihoods for their people or for themselves. There's something like another 40 villages that are due to be moved to higher ground. What impact will it have on their health? What impact will it have on their ability to access those types of services that we're trying to provide? So these are very real issues, and we need to be able to have a clear understanding of this and appreciation that our ability to monitor, our ability to even assess our current standing as individual countries, and our ability to provide that level of accessibility and level of empowerment can be very easily washed away. There needs to be an understanding also that when we have this discourse as a nation, when we are discussing as such aspects and wanting to provide solutions for it, long-term solutions, they need to be done objectively. They need to be done with statistics, they need to be done with facts and figures, and they need to be done actually with a long-term view. Many of the issues that we are facing today cannot necessarily be solved overnight. Many of these issues today that we are facing cannot have solutions driven by what we call political imperatives. They need to be actually driven by human development imperatives. And this is why, this is where collaboration is very, very critical. We need the political collaboration. We need to be able to have collaboration between the different agencies. We need to have complementarity between development agencies, between bilateral donors, bilateral partners, and the host governments. It is very critical, because if we are able to then have that level of complementarity, then you can provide a very focused attention in respect of uplifting the human condition of different segments within our own society. And that is very critical. It also, of course, lends to what has been said about inclusiveness. I mean, that is all part and parcel of inclusiveness. Inclusiveness is not simply about attending a meeting. Inclusiveness is actually about ensuring that people are very much part and parcel of the policy drive that's being implemented. And I think that, ladies and gentlemen, is something very, very critical. We obviously want to further collaborate with the different UN agencies. We need to meet the SDG goals. We also need to be able to understand our own vulnerabilities. We need private sector participation in this too. I think a lot of times people forget, and they think that all of these matters can only be solved through the through the private sector. Only through government and UN agencies. There needs to be very critical input from the private sector, whether it is to do with their take on areas that are generally confined to the private sphere, what they generally call the private sphere, whether it's domestic violence, whether it's about insurance, whether it's about providing jobs. One of the issues that, of course, we need to be able to ensure is that things like, changing the paradigm. We must have our high school leavers or university leavers not simply become job seekers. They need to become job creators. How can the private sector participate with them to be able to help them become job creators as opposed to simply become job leavers? We have issues such as teenage pregnancy. This is something that was discussed with the UNDP head yesterday. How do we address them? A lot of the times we are not able to discuss many issues that are considered taboo, or it's an area that's deemed to be in the private sphere. But what was very interestingly and very wisely mentioned to me yesterday, that in order to get around that, it's maybe the verbiage that we use should be changed. So the moment you talk about teenage pregnancies, people talk about, oh, we're going to have sex education. Sex education does get some people, get their backs up against the wall. But if we are able to then talk about it in a positive sense, that it means about empowering women, about empowering them to have a control over their body, about telling them if they actually get pregnant beforehand that they're going to have an income loss. I think there's been some assessment that has been done that if people get pregnant in their teens as opposed to getting pregnant at the age of 25, they'll be $38,000 worse off, because they've done some income calculations. If they're going to factor in the ability to attend university and complete the education and get a job. So I think it's our ability with the different agencies to be able to have that level of conversation and to be able to have the right level of conversation with the right verbiage to be able to get the messages across. So I'd like to once again thank UN for this report. It's obviously used by many people as a indicator as to what a country should do or shouldn't do and how better it can improve itself. And we'd like to, of course, thank them for the launch here this afternoon. We are quite excited about this, and we again would like to, our message to all of you is that we want to work together with you, because at the end of the day, the main objective is to bring those people who are on the periphery into the center, those people who are being marginalized into the mainstream. And it also demonstrates that sometimes the simple things like just a simple wage increase or a simple measurement of average income values is not the way to go. Is the actual nuts and bolts of how well an individual is doing, what type of services they have access to, are they able to have connectivity to water, electricity, medical services, is what at the end of the day does matter, because it then helps them to improve their lives. Thank you very much. Thank you.